in the experience of the Global Green Growth Institute, what really matters is to create opportunities that meet countries' political economy. So across the world, we now work in about 20 countries. We're a young international organization, but we're expanding quickly. We have operations in about 20 countries. Across the board, what we see is that countries have economic objectives, they have development aspirations, and if green growth can help them achieve those economic objectives and meet the development aspiration of their people, then they'll embrace it. If green growth does not allow them to achieve those objectives, then they will not embrace it. So our work at GGGI is really to help them understand what works and what doesn't work of green growth for them, and how green growth can help them meet their objectives and their aspirations. And we are seeing that many elements of green growth are very, very close to the objectives of countries in terms of creating opportunities for jobs, in terms of using the natural resources more effectively, in terms of becoming more energy independent, and in terms of tackling both local environmental issues and taking some action to reduce levels of emissions globally, which many countries want to do across the developing and emerging world. So incentives is really what this is all about. Now, you were asking about whether we see some countries taking the leadership. Yes, we've seen that there's some countries that have shown fantastic leadership from the very top. The countries that come to mind are Ethiopia, where the former Prime Minister Meles Zenawi was extremely clear that he saw green growth at the heart of the strategy to become middle-income country by 2025. He saw that green growth was at the very heart of it, and Ethiopia is really continuing in that legacy very strongly. Rwanda is also showing great leadership on this. Costa Rica, one of our member countries, is showing great leadership on, particularly in terms of integrating the values of natural capital in their planning. So is, without any doubt, Mexico, another country where both the previous government, but the current government as well, are really putting green growth right at the heart of the economic plans. Indonesia, another country where we've worked for a long time, has been fantastic both in taking action on forestry, but now on mainstreaming green growth in the economic planning process. So I'm very excited, and I'm very excited about being here at the COP and being able to tell the story of action that is going on bottom up across the world. Just because it makes sense for these countries, not because of a desire to be green, just because it makes sense for them to change their models of economic growth in this direction.
There are all these different mechanisms and streams of negotiations going on here. Sometimes it's quite bewildering. There's so many different papers coming out and texts that you wonder how people can even keep track. Would the simplest thing just to agree a global carbon price and be done with everything else? Because once you have a global carbon price, would not everything in a simple and easy world just fall into place?
So I'll give you two answers. As I know, I have two roles. I'm the chief economist of the Institute, and then I'm also doing the implementation side. So I'll give you the first answer as a chief economist. Of course, a global homogeneous carbon price is the most efficient way to internalize the externality. There you go, a bit of economics jargon for you. It's the best way of the economy pricing the emissions at the right level. So of course, that'd be great. If you had a global carbon price, we could shut the whole thing down and go home and be happy. Now, if I change my hat and look at what's going on in the world and the political economy of that process, we are not seeing signs that we're moving in that direction fast enough. So we really have to be pragmatic and think about what is the second best option in the absence of a global carbon price. We can't forget that the direction of travel should be that one, but we have to look at second best options. And I think the actions we're seeing bottom up are not a bad second best option in this political context. And this means actions in developing and emerging countries, but it also means, and primarily means, action in developed countries. There are many rich countries which are moving, and we're seeing phenomenal amounts of investment going into renewables across the world. $360 billion of financial flows in 2012 went into climate-related activities. Half of this was in developing countries, half of this was in developed countries. Developed countries, most of the money was private money. It went to finance large-scale infrastructure for renewables. That's a kind of action that, even in an absence of a homogeneous carbon price, is in the right directions. We need to see much more than that. We probably now need $1 trillion a year of investment in climate action. So we are way short of that trillion a year, but we are moving in the right direction on that.
In terms of when you speak to governments, how hard is it to get them to look at the long term? Because politics seems to work, well, it does work in 5-year electoral cycles. Quite hard for some governments, parties to think much longer than that. But it seems that a lot of green investments pay back, but they pay back especially well over a long period of time. So what kind of work, what can the Green Growth Institute offer in terms of helping governments work through that process?
Yeah. What we're finding out is that many of the benefits of taking action on climate are actually not that long term. The benefits that relate to job creations, the benefits that relate to less reliance on natural resources, the benefits that relate to less local pollution are immediate. They come in years, not in decades, and they're so important to governments. Let me give you an example. China. The concern they have about local pollution and food quality, actually, is pushing them in the direction of being much more careful about how they use their natural resources, in particular the water. Those, incidentally, happen to be things which are extremely important for the long term and for emissions as well, and they understand that. But this balance between long-term vision and short-term benefits from this action is now becoming more and more clear. And at the Global Green Growth Institute, one of the things we do is help countries understand the magnitude of those benefits and which ones they'll see appear earlier, which ones they'll see appear later, and try to make them, to help them, support them understand how they can time their activities so they can achieve their objectives in the short term, as well as laying the foundations for long-term change.